Welcome everyone to another episode of the Represented series. Really excited to have you all here today. This is our Fireside edition, so I'm excited to bring in our next guest, Nathaniel Moore. Nathaniel, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's good to see you.
No, absolutely. Good to see you as well. So I know before we hopped on, we were talking about our book reading.
Yeah.
And all the books that we want to, read for the rest of the year. And I also meant to add to that, I've been in kind of like a growth-minded phase. So I think those are all of the books that I'm, my soul is just kind of leaning towards.
Yeah.
What about you? What type of kind of mood book reading, like a book reading?
I bounce all over the place in the literary space. Like I just finished reading The Neverending Story, which was one of my favorite childhood movies. But
oh my God, I don't think I ever actually read the book, but I used to watch that all of the time. One of my all-time favorite movies.
Well, I read Princess Bride on a flight, blew my mind. I thought, what other childhood movies did I enjoy that I have not read the corresponding books? So I did Willy Wonka and then Neverending Story this year, and this has been fun. But I use those to break up the heavy reading and the more serious, so I'll bounce around genres.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I'll have to read that. I used to love that movie as a kid. So I can imagine the book was just equally as brilliant.
Oh, 100%.
Awesome. Well, now that we've got, all the things that we know about you from a book reading perspective, let's definitely dive into more of what you do. So, please share with everyone what you do.
Yeah, so I am a financial planner in Fresno, California. We're in the central part of California, right smack dab in the middle of the state. We work with clients throughout the United States, but my main focus is fee-based financial planning and investment advisory services, specifically for entrepreneurial and managerial women, but we work with everybody who has a need for the services.
Awesome. Well, that sounds really fantastic. And I think a lot to break down there. I feel like, since you have a focus on entrepreneurs, I feel like there's always a gap there where, as entrepreneurs and business owners, sometimes we forget that that's an important thing that we need to stay on top of, right? It's like you might leave that bubble of corporate, and what are the nuances sometimes from a financial perspective that you see with entrepreneurs, or you're just kind of educating entrepreneurs on?
Well, there's two sides to that. If I can say on the general entrepreneur side, one of the nuances is reminding them that you still have to plan for life outside of the business. For many entrepreneurs, their business is their end all be all. And if it doesn't work out or they don't exit it, what's the financial solution? But what I found over the last decade is that female entrepreneurs are a little different than male entrepreneurs in that for us male entrepreneurs, we can focus on the business and do not have very many responsibilities at home, generally speaking.
Let's talk about that. What was that?
Where female entrepreneurs have to focus on business, but then still focus on home and responsibilities, generally speaking. So I think there's a big weight on female entrepreneurs, which is why we wanted to be, that lighthouse in the ocean for them, to give them advice and guidance.
No, absolutely. And I think it's great that you kind of, take that approach, right? And actually acknowledge that there tends to sometimes be a difference in the way women are able to run their businesses versus how men potentially can, run their businesses, possibly having more freedom. And, I think now we're seeing a lot more men working from home and things like that. So a lot of this shift is somewhat changing, but there's still there's still that household, right? And unfortunately, there's still a lot of stereotypes about who runs that household. But from an entrepreneurial perspective, I think I'm glad to see this shift is changing. We're seeing a lot more women run businesses, more Black women run businesses. Is that what you're seeing while you're working with clients?
I agree. I'm definitely seeing that. And I just want to say, we talk about the household, and the household extends beyond just husband and children. For female entrepreneurs, the household is mother, father, other family obligations that they tend to still care about. Where the single track male, once again, I'm being very stereotypical, but the single track male gets the privilege to just focus on the task at hand, where the daughter is still taking care of little brother and sister, still taking care of mother, father, or whatever else household they have going on. But the shifting roles have definitely made a big difference. People now have the freedom and the liberty to pursue what they want to pursue. However, those societal weights still hold them back and hold them down, and sometimes it stops the progress because of that unspoken pressure or that spoken pressure to stay in those traditional roles.
Absolutely. So when you're talking to your clients or even potential clients, how do you engage in that conversation around, breaking down some of those communication walls, especially as business owners, and helping them to understand how important this things is, all of this is, right? You're talking about the household does extend to that generational family. And I think to some degree, we're kind of starting to get back to that, or at least we're seeing it a lot more. Which is becoming a lot more prevalent, to understand that, hey, people are taking care of a lot more than just their household and people who possibly live with them. And sometimes it's very, multi-generational too.
Yeah, I think the challenge is, and what we try to focus on is convincing our clients and our prospective clients to look under the bed and realize that there is no boogie monster down there, right? We have these perceived fears, we have these perceived concerns, and we let them run through our mind and take us through all the physiological and emotional turmoil as though they're real, because we just don't want to face them. And so we try to outline, what are the legitimate concerns that you have before you? What are the legitimate challenges you have before you? What are realistic ways to overcome those challenges and hurdles? So now you can have the energy to move forward to, pursuing your goals. And oftentimes that's just showing them that the boogeyman is not as big or as bad as he seems.
Oh yeah, and sometimes you just got to face the boogeyman head on, and stare him and her in the face, right? And as scary as that might be, it also gives you power, right? I think sometimes we forget with our money to take our power back, and the only way to do that is really just to face it head on. How do you help people really understand, or just face that fear, right? Because it's scary to look under the bed and see what's under there. But how do you bring them to that point of acknowledging, whatever was in the past, and then also helping to push them forward?
Yeah, I like to spend a lot of time on the feel-good aspect of planning and the feel-good aspect of their future goals, because whatever's happened in the past, whatever they're facing right now, they need to have something to look forward to. So we spend a good amount of our time daydreaming. What is that ideal life you want to have? What does the finish line look like? What does retirement look like? What does that first house look like? What does that selling of that business look like? That way they can have an anchor point to always hold on to, because let's just face it, life is real, and life gets tough and challenges pop up, unforeseen, foreseen, and we need to have something that we're anchored to that can pull us out of that pit. We go back to the Neverending Story. We talk about the pit of despair in that movie and in that book. It was really just the sadness of their life started to overtake them, and they sunk into that sadness. And so we're all going to face that at times, but if we have something that we're anchored to that can pull us out, we have a chance of surviving it. So we spend time daydreaming. One of my favorite videos to share with our clients, and it's on YouTube, is called The Mexican Fisherman. And it's a parable of just creating a life that you want to live, realizing that you may already have it and you don't have to wait 25, 30 years to achieve it. You and I talked about spending time with family, friends, and doing things. Those are some of the happy points that can be their anchors to pull them through the tough times. So that daydream phase makes all the difference in the world. And then it also gives me something to remind them of every meeting, or periodically say, oh, remember, you're looking forward to this.
No, that's great. And I love the daydreaming part of it, because I feel like we forget to do that, right? Money tends to become like this, facade, or just this really heavy burden, especially now, right? Given everything, that's going on in the economy, and just watching the markets and all of the things, right? The news. And it seems very heavy, but it can also be very light and fun, especially, again, like when you take control of it and you do daydream and you remember all the stuff that you want to accomplish that makes it great. And we don't have to kind of focus in the sadness that you're saying. What are a lot of just the joys that you see that kind of come from people when they're able to get through that part and they're focusing on those daydreams?
Well, one thing I want to say about the daydreams is that, the first 75% of our developing lives, we're encouraged to daydream. And then the rest of it, we're discouraged to daydream. And go figure, we develop that muscle, we develop that skill, and then from like 12,
Right.
13
Life
hours,
snatches it away.
yeah. And it's just so frustrating. So when you give people a chance, like we did a client event where we provided these sensory boxes of just Play-Doh, little figurines and so forth, and we called it thinking outside of the box. And we gave the attendees the chance just to daydream and create their ideal cake that represents, all the happy things in their life. And so they light up, they're excited, they're laughing. And it doesn't mean that whatever you're dealing with isn't still there to be dealt with, but you're working on that happy muscle when you're daydreaming that becomes stronger to overpower the sad muscle. Like they say, it takes, 42 muscles to frown and 7 to smile. I don't know the exact number, but it's easier to smile than it is to be sad. You just have to have a reason to do so. So when we're in there in these meetings, we're laughing. I'm sharing my daydreams. They're sharing their daydreams. We're talking about the commonalities. We're anchoring them. Like, why is that important to you? Why would you like to take that cruise around the world? Who would you take it with? If time was not an issue and money was no object, how long would you stay in these places? And just giving them permission to think about beyond just their bills and their current situation.
Nice. Yeah, it's almost often like probably therapeutic to kind of walk through that exercise and just release and get your hands dirty and play with something. To your point, right? Like, yeah,
And just dive in.
exactly. Like all the things that we used to do, the creativity that we used to have when we were kids, when we would just build. Like the most fun I have is when I go see my younger nieces and nephews, my friends' kids, and we just play Legos. And it's literally like just that box of Legos where there's no instructions. And they're just like, what are you building? I'm just like, I don't know. But then something like something comes up that looks cool. But it's just, the fun of that, naivete, of that relaxation that you kind of get to have in that space. So when you're taking people through that kind of daydream phase, how are you starting to match that with, their goals and where they want to go from there? So I know it's kind of like that phase one. And then what does it look like to take them through the next part of it?
So the first thing I tell them, let's say, there are no limitations on it. Don't restrict what you would like to see or what you would like to have based on what it's going to cost or how long it's going to take to get there. We can work out that detail later. There's a big difference between no and not yet. So we want to outline as many of those future goals they have. Some are truly outlandish, but what I found is that for most people, when they daydream, because it's not a muscle they've used often, the dreams are very attainable. And it seems like a stretch to them, but they're very realistic. They're very, I just want to take a trip to Ireland. Well, you can do that for $1,200 right now and have a great time. So once we get like 5 to 7 of their daydreams, then we start to work backwards to say, what are some that you can realistically start to implement right now? First things first, what are ones that we don't even need a plan for? You can just do today. And then secondly, what are the ones that we can start to implement, and how do they play into your overall financial plan? Because I'm a big believer that even when you have financial obligations to commit to, you still need to have a fun budget so you can actually step away, enjoy yourself, so you don't have resentment to your goals. So we'll bring in some of those daydreams that are just fun, that have no logical financial purpose. And then they will be the motivation to achieve the financial goals that do have logical purpose. So we just take the daydreams, bring them down to the manageable or implementable level, and then start to work on them, incorporating 1 or 2 of them into their plan each year.
That's really awesome. And I like the fact that you said, what can we do today, right? Because a lot of times when we're planning, and especially when we're doing financial planning, it's always like, that's going to be another 3, 5, 6, 10, 12, like 30 years down the line when I actually get to see the results. And it's just like, no, you can actually do something today that doesn't have to be so granular, over the top, but what are the 1, 2, 3 things that you can get today by the end of the week, maybe by the end of the month, and start with that. So I really like that you take that approach with your clients.
We talked about reading. One of my favorite books is Don Quixote. I have the statue right here that reminds me of it, but if you know the story, if you don't know the story of Don Quixote, this is somebody who read just so much and too much that they say his brain dried up from reading. and he couldn't separate reality from the stories he was reading. But it was his squire's job, Sancho Panza's job, to humor his reality, but still guide him towards what he needed in his life. And so sometimes that daydream, our job as planners is to really just be that squire to say, oh, that's an amazing dream. Let's make it happen and show them the reality steps to get there, but not deflate the dream that they're looking, because perception is reality, right? And if you tell me you want to be a world traveler, I'm gonna tell you, hey, let's make you a world traveler. That may be one continent every 3 years, but you're still a world traveler. So we're not taking away that part of your goal.
Yeah, absolutely. You're definitely still a world traveler, right? I mean, I feel like everyone, it's almost like you're redefining like what each thing is, right? It doesn't have to be, oh, a world traveler means I'm doing all of this in the next couple weeks or the next couple months. It's just like, if it needs to be spread out, you're still hitting that goal that is set for you, right? That is specifically crafted and attainable with a new definition and a new twist, that you're actually able to deliver. And I'm sure it's amazing when your clients actually hit those goals, and they're probably sending you pictures from, wherever they are, or if their family completes something, or whatever that is. What are some really great wins that you can share that your clients have had based on kind of going through this journey?
Well, one, I mean, I think about a client I met with this week who is a farmer doing extremely well, but really wants to go back to school and focus on therapy. And this past week, they got all their stuff together to start the enrollment process for school. And that's a big win, because, they were told, this is your job, this is your role, this is who you are, this is your identity. And the education schooling is a complete 180. But to step away from, well, not stepping away from it yet, but to step away from a successful business to pursue a completely different career field was the daydream of all daydreams that now is becoming reality. So that's an example right there. One of the things I like about those conversations is I find how much I have in common with some of my clients, and some of our dreams become common dreams. So like in 2019, I went to Cuba for 2 weeks with one of my clients. And it came out of one of these daydream conversations, and come to find out he had always wanted to travel there, and I had always wanted to travel there. And it's kind of like, well, let's make a trip. Let's plan to travel there together. And we spent 2 weeks in Cuba together. And that would have not happened had it not come from those, conversations about what do you want to do outside of just the day-to-day work.
Yeah, that's really amazing. It also sounds extremely, extremely fun. So I can imagine the beautiful trip. Cuba is obviously beautiful. So I can imagine the time that you all had there. I mean, even just kind of having those types of relationships, right? I think that, clients, and that word client, but it also turns into friend and family, which is a beautiful thing, and really being able to watch someone's journey or their dreams come true, where they can do those things, and you can also possibly participate in those things with them if you just kind of have that open conversation. Do you feel like you've always had that level of transparency and open conversation kind of built into who you are, and also in your business?
Well, not always. I mean, at one point in my life, I had over 1,800 households that I was responsible for. And I was at a firm before going independent, and anytime an advisor would leave, their clients would be assigned to us because of the licenses I had and so forth. But there were times that I would be standing in the grocery store next to a client that they're like, aren't you Nathan? I think you manage my insurance portfolio. I'm like, oh, that's embarrassing that I didn't even recognize you. And so there was just no way to go deep in those relationships. So when I went independent in 2008, I made that conscious and tough decision that we wouldn't have more than 100 households that we actively do financial planning or investment management for, because I want to be able to go deeper in those relationships. And so in our meetings, we're very transparent. I mean, the first thing I tell every client is the quality of the advice I give you is only as accurate as the information you give me. And if somebody finds out about this outside of this room, it's because you told them. But I'm also going to tell you stuff about my life and the mistakes that I've made and the successes that I've had. And I'm hoping for that same confidence. And if somebody finds out here, it's because I told them, hopefully not that you told them. And when we start off with that level of transparency, I think there's a human element to it, that they know that, okay, we can believe this guy because he can relate. or when I tell them, hey, I'm going to share with you the challenge I faced with credit card debt in 2005 and six, and this is what I did to overcome it. So when I give you this recommendation and advice, it's from application, not theory.
Yeah, which is so important too. And I just think that, being fully transparent like you are with your clients and really building, a company culture and business around that also builds to trust, right? So it leans right into the trust factor and breeds for more conversations. Because, sometimes people sit down with, financial professionals and it's just like you're still holding on to all of this stuff and you're either scared or embarrassed to share or a combination of a lot of things. But when you can kind of break down a lot of those walls and people can just really show up as they are and be themselves and be fully transparent, it just leads to those dynamic conversations that it seems like you've been able to have.
I also think that we put an unnecessary burden of perfectionism on ourselves as
Mhm.
financial professionals. So we think, oh, that person will not want to work with me if they find out I did this, or if they find out that I struggled with this. And that may be the case. But what I found is the majority of the people are relieved that you're a real person. And as long as you're giving them solid advice, and as long as you're no longer in that trap, they're willing to take the advice. But we create this fear of sharing that, like I found from my own personal experience, nobody has ever looked at me. Well, they may have looked at me with a side eye when I blinked and looked away, but no one has ever really just like, wow, I can't believe you let that happen. They're like, wow, thank you for sharing, because I dealt with something similar to that, or I'm dealing with something similar to that. So I encourage all financial professionals to be transparent about what their experiences, their wins and their losses, because people learn from both.
Yeah, and that's equally important to share, right? Because it's being transparent on both ends. It's not just the professional who's sitting in that seat of, not feeling like they can share that they'll be judged. Because, on the other end, to your point, it's like if you can, share your story with someone that can also help to motivate them and also deepen their knowledge and education and also yours too, right? Because you walk that walk, you've been through that, and now you can say, hey, well, this is what I did, and now it's even more applicable to what you might be trying to do, in leaving that legacy. So as we kind of roll into that word legacy, what are your plans for legacy and how you're building your practice and where you kind of see your business going, in the next couple of years?
Yeah, that plan shifts and changes. It seems like every couple of months nowadays because my oldest child has three children and wants to be a correctional officer, so she's out of the business prospects. My son, he's in the middle. He just graduated high school. He's on his way to college, but he shows no interest in money. And my daughter, who is the money savvy one, really has no interest in staying in town. So from a legacy standpoint, I thought it was going to be family, and it's not. So from my business personally, I'm in the middle of grooming a young advisor that I'm bringing on who has been a financial planning client for the last 2 years. His wife was a client for the previous 4 years. His in-laws were clients for the previous 15 years. So they've all been around it, loves the business. And so now he's coming on. And that's part of the legacy plan, is to have someone else that can learn the way that we interact and work with our clients. That way, if I retire or God forbid something else happens, it can be a seamless transition for them. I don't want to be that person that thinks I'll never retire, I'll never leave this. I don't think that's healthy. But I do want to be at a place, and I have a target at a place where I can say, I'm no longer the decision maker, or I'm no longer the face of the firm. We have capable people that are here that can help you. And if you still want to continue to have me help you, that's great. But just know that we also have another advisor that's watching over what we're doing together.
That's awesome. And really exciting too, so that you can kind of see the future of the business. I know the kids are just like, nah, I'm good.
Yeah.
But that could also change, right? It's like you never know. Maybe
Yeah.
at some point someone, might have an epiphany and they're like, yeah, this is really great and I want to do it. But it's really interesting that your client, has become interested in the business. Did that just kind of naturally happen over conversation? Because I think this kind of opens a door for other people who, might be going through this process with their advisor or planner and might say, hey, I actually enjoy this, right? I actually might want to help teach other people about their finances.
It does, because when your conversation, when 70% of your conversation is more about philosophical money concepts and life and things outside of the portfolio, it really makes people feel good about the decisions they're making. And so for them, it was really organic in the sense that our conversations just continuing on. It's like, wow, this is fascinating. I enjoy this, and I really want to be in a position to share this with other millennials, other young professionals like myself who didn't hear this information. That's what that was his motivation behind coming into the business, is he wants to share it with other young professionals that weren't given that information. So he pursued it. I said, hey, let's discuss this, and now we're in the throes of making it happen. So just having those conversations, almost kind of that daydream again, because it was a daydream of like, hey, what would you like to do for a career other than what you're doing now? Fast forward 3 years, he's now almost fully licensed. He has one more license to go before he can be a full-fledged advisor. So I think it's good for people to have that conversation. I've had that conversation with 5 or 6 clients in the last few years during the pandemic phase of life, like what's your next phase? And no one's been interested in it, but I've had the conversation with them.
That's really awesome. And it's also great to be open to just be open, right? To be open to different career opportunities, trajectories for your life, and not feeling like, hey, I have to be pigeonholed into something that I've done for the past however many years, right? It's being able to be open and separate your identity from your work, which can sometimes be tough to do. But I think, as a world, we had to kind of do that during the height of the pandemic and really reevaluate. So it's great to see that conversation and other conversations, even if they're not interested, right? They're still being had. People are still getting a window into an industry that's kind of been somewhat closed off to some degree. And now we get to kind of pull down the curtain from it, which is, a lot of what we hope to do.
Yeah.
So
And my mission and motto was give them the chance to say no. And if you don't extend it to them to begin with, whatever it is, whatever the offer is, if you don't extend it to them out the gate, they don't have a chance to say no. You've denied them that opportunity. So at least give them the chance to say no. Who knows? They may say yes out of it. And for me, it's a little bit selfish in that I'm 47. I think I got a few more years to do this, but the industry has changed a million times in the 22 years that I've been in it. But majority of the change has happened in the last few years. And I like to have younger professionals around me that can keep up with the changes and advise me on it. Just like I tell my kids, do not let me walk out the house with Crocs and tube socks. It's your responsibility to make sure that I stay fashion forward.
Oh, yeah. No.
I need to have somebody in the business that's also telling me, yeah, Grandpa, I have 3 granddaughters. Yeah, Grandpa, we don't do it like that anymore. You need to take advantage of this technology. You need to use the CHIP app. You need to do these things that are now the way we do planning. So it's selfish in that I want to stay ahead of the curve as well, and I just can't do it on my own.
Yeah, not the tube socks. Now I just had this whole vision of you in Crocs and tube socks and the old church suits at the cookout with the plate. And it's just no. Even I'm not gonna let you go out like that.
Thank you. I got people looking out.
We got you. We gonna rein you back in.
I appreciate it. I welcome all the accountability because I don't want to be that guy.
No, you cannot. We will not let you be that guy. Not on my watch. Not on their watch either. So what is your favorite thing to daydream about? Before we let you go, I know we talked a lot about daydreaming, and I think, this has been such a powerful conversation to really think about that. But what are your favorite things when you just kind of let your mind wander?
Yeah, so my daydream portal almost always centers around travel. Just because I love to experience other cultures. I love to experience other cultures' pace of life. It also gives me an appreciation for our way of life here in the United States. But every time I've traveled, I've come back modifying how I spend money or what I need or what I want. So most of my daydreaming involves excursions, trips and travel. And then the other part of it is philanthropic. I daydream about the opportunity to write big checks to some of the nonprofits that I support. We support them financially, we support them volunteer-wise, but I daydream about things like the ability to write that 6-figure anonymous check and not have to get the credit for it or the tax write-off for my business. Those are the things that allow me to smile and allow me to keep going.
Nice. And likewise on the large check writing, the anonymous check writing, like that's the goal right there. It's the anonymous check writing. Well, thank you so much for hopping on the Represented series and for all that you do, in the industry and externally. The dynamic work that you're doing. I hope everyone who is watching definitely considers to take time and put it on even their calendar when you get a chance to daydream, right? To have those mind wandering opportunities that I'm sure definitely create lots of creativity, relaxation, and probably just a feeling of warmth. So I definitely hear you on that, especially on the traveling, in the excursions. That is like an absolute go-to. But please tell everyone. Oh, go ahead.
I was like, thank you for the opportunity to share. And I appreciate all that you're doing. I mean, you're creating platforms that are allowing voices and representation to be made that hasn't been made in years past. So keep up the good work.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. And definitely more to come. Please tell everyone where they can find you.
Yeah, so our firm, AGAPE Planning Partners, you can find us at www.appwealth.com. You can find me on Facebook, but it's not very active. We're working on getting our Instagram and active, but LinkedIn is the most active if you want to follow on social. But go to the website, check it in. I love to meet people, so there's our calendars on there where you can set up a time for a coffee chat if you're in person, or a virtual coffee just to talk about life.
Great. Well, Nathan, thanks again. And to everyone who's watching, make sure you tune into this episode and also other episodes of the Represented series. Make sure you take time to catch up. Nathan, thanks again. Have a wonderful day, and you all have a wonderful day as well.
Take care. Thank you.